You're like my only real friend, Sarah. Everyone at my new school pretends they like me because my mom writes the midnight books, you know.
Hi. Are you a friend of Bree's?
Yeah, I am. Is she here?
Oh, no, she's at an appointment. She'll be back later, though.
She's not.
No.
Well, would you mind sending my copy of Midnight Blood-Drenched Tears, please?
They want to meet her, or they ask me shit about what's gonna happen in the books. Like I know.
Oh, that's so annoying.
How's it going with your host sister? She goes back to Poland soon, right?
She was totally lame. She, kept to herself and was way into my mom.
I'm about to leave.
Oh.
I would like to say goodbye.
It was. So you were such a big help.
Oh, thank you so much, Lily. You think so?
Yes. You were really helpful helping me move all that stuff to the gallery. Just really, it's just lovely to have you here.
I would love to be back.
Had the hots for her?
I don't know. She just asked about art and the gallery and all of that, but seemed to me like an excuse just to be around her.
Ew, what a weirdo. I have to go in a minute. I have an appointment with a healer. It's like a shrink for hippies.
Maybe the healer will rub crystals all over you.
Hi, I have some proposals and slides for Dana Pasquale.
She had to take some to the airport last minute, but she told me to take your samples and she'll be able to call you tonight.
Am I making you uncomfortable? I'm sorry, I just get excited.
This lesbian anthology film, when approached through a queer, emotionally grounded lens that centers women's interior lives rather than sensational plot mechanics, reveals itself as a meditation on how women, especially queer women, learn to recognize desire, admiration, and selfhood in a culture that alternately commodifies and suppresses them. And the first vignette involving Alana, Adriana, and the unseen but emotionally central Brie functions as a quiet thesis for the entire project. Women are taught to orbit power, creativity, and intimacy, long before they are taught how to claim those things for themselves. Alana, the famous author, occupies a liminal space familiar to many older queer women and feminist creatives. She is successful, admired, financially secure, yet subtly estranged from her own emotional center, having written stories about longing and sacrifice that resonate with readers precisely because they are distilled from feelings she has never fully lived out loud. Her conversation early in the scene about resurrecting a beloved character because fans begged for it is more than meta-commentary about authorship. It mirrors how women are often pressured to revive versions of themselves that others feel entitled to, even when doing so no longer makes internal sense. That Alana wrote her breakout work on a lark in a creative writing class underscores a recurring truth in women's lives. Transformative work often emerges accidentally, from private spaces only to be seized, monetized, and endlessly interrogated by the public, leaving the creator both powerful and oddly powerless. Against this backdrop enters Adriana, Bree's school friend, whose obsession with Alana is framed not as predatory or inappropriate, but as a familiar queer experience of admiration tipping into emotional fascination. The kind that many lesbians recognize from adolescence or early adulthood, when role models, teachers, artists, or friends' parents became the first safe objects onto which desire, curiosity, and aspiration could be projected. Adriana's nervous excitement, her insistence that Alana's books made me start reading, speaks to the way queer girls often find themselves through other women's words and presence long before they have language for their own identities. And the scene is careful, when read generously, to show this not as a scandal, but as a moment of mutual vulnerability. Adriana is seeking recognition, and Alana, despite her fame, is hungry for genuine connection unmediated by fan culture or professional obligation. The film's choice to situate this encounter in a domestic space rather than a public signing is crucial, because it foregrounds intimacy over performance. Their interaction unfolds through compliments, shared breath, and tentative pauses, all of which can be read as the quiet electricity of two women realizing they are being seen not as roles, author, fan, mother's friend, but as embodied, feeling people. Importantly, a queer, emotionally responsible reading resists reducing this to transgression or titillation, and instead understands it as a portrait of how uneven power dynamics complicate queer longing, especially in a society that offers women so few sanctioned avenues for exploring desire that does not center men. Alana's hesitation, her repeated "I don't know if this is okay," mirrors the internal negotiations many queer women perform when desire surfaces in unexpected places, the fear of harm, of misreading, of being judged not only by others but by one's own internalized rules about propriety and safety. Adriana's breathless awe, her repeated affirmations of beauty, echo the way queer women often learn to speak desire through admiration first, because admiration feels safer, more defensible, more socially acceptable than naming want outright. That the scene never fully resolves this tension, but instead breaks it with Alana pulling back and asserting care, "I'm going to get you out of this right now," is significant because it reframes restraint, not as repression but as responsibility, suggesting that queer visibility does not require crossing every boundary, only acknowledging the truth of feeling when it appears. This vignette gains further depth when placed alongside the larger anthology structure, particularly the parallel story of Bree seeking help from Ava, an earthy spiritual healer, which, when stripped of sensational phrasing, reads as a metaphor for a young woman attempting to reclaim her body and sense of self from the noise surrounding her mother's fame and her own unwanted visibility. Bree's distress, her sense that everyone at her new school pretends they like me because my mom writes the midnight books, is a painfully relatable articulation of how girls, especially queer girls, can feel erased by projection, reduced to extensions of someone else's narrative. Ava's role as healer, when interpreted through a non-sexual, emotionally grounded lens, becomes about guiding Bree back into her own physical and emotional awareness, helping her understand sensation, boundaries, and pleasure not as performance but as information, which resonates with queer audiences who often arrive at self-knowledge through alternative, non-institutional forms of care after traditional systems fail to see them. The film's recurring motif of unconventional support, healers instead of shrinks, artists instead of authority figures, chosen connections instead of prescribed ones, aligns with a long queer tradition of survival through community building outside mainstream approval. When this anthology is further contextualized by its prison-related threads, the social commentary sharpens. Prisons and queer narratives frequently symbolize the ultimate institutional attempt to regulate bodies, desires, and relationships. And the film's insistence on centering women's emotional bonds, rather than crimes or punishments, acts as a critique of systems that respond to vulnerability with containment instead of care. The discomfort society feels when women express love for each other, whether through admiration, mentorship, or intimacy, is rooted in the threat such bonds pose to hierarchical control. Women who validate one another do not require constant external approval, and queer women in particular disrupt narratives that frame desire as something women owe to men or must justify through tragedy. By weaving together stories of a famous author boxed in by her own success, a young woman overwhelmed by inherited attention, a friend learning to articulate admiration, and broader institutional critiques, the film argues that lesbian and queer women's experiences are not niche or peripheral but foundational to understanding how longing, repression, and authenticity operate in women's lives at large. Women watching may recognize themselves in Alana's exhaustion, Adriana's intensity, Bree's confusion, or Ava's grounding presence, regardless of sexual orientation, because the emotional throughline is universal: the ache to be known without being consumed, to be desired without being diminished, to be visible without being exposed. The anthology format itself reinforces this truth, suggesting that no single story can contain queer womanhood, but together these vignettes form a mosaic of becoming, one that honors hesitation as much as courage and restraint as much as revelation. Ultimately, this is not a film about taboo or fantasy, but about the fragile, necessary work of naming connection in a world that alternately sensationalizes and silences it. And for lesbian and LGBTQ+ audiences seeking authenticity, its power lies not in what is shown but in what is acknowledged. That women's feelings for each other are real, complex, ethically charged, and worthy of serious, compassionate attention, even, and especially, when they do not fit neatly into the stories society is comfortable telling.